Hey y'all, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the fragments of our identity. We're going to be talking about misplaced identity. And specifically, I want to introduce you all to this concept, this theory developed by Erik Erikson. And it's this idea of the stages of psychosocial development. So if you've been rocking with me since we first started teaching on the abortion recovery awareness series, or if you've listened to the encouraging words, then you know that when I went to undergrad, I started off as a psych major and then I transitioned to a sociology major. And I have a master's in curriculum and instruction. I also have a master's in special education and applied behavior analysis, as well as I'm a master's level social worker. And so, all throughout college, I've been taught about this man. I've been taught about these different stages of development. And I want to introduce it to you all today because it's going to be very important when we talk about identity. It's going to be very important when we talk about, the decisions, the things that shape our decisions, as well as abortion recovery. And so, journey along with me, and I want to take y'all into a quick story time. Okay, but before we get into the story time, I want to talk to y'all really quick about, if you have my book, then you've read chapter one, hopefully. And in chapter one, the first paragraph starts off very juicy, and you will believe that this is about to be a good, juicy fiction book. And so I'm going to read the first paragraph. It's really, really quick. And then we're going to get into story time and we're going to get into it. Okay. And so my chapter one is called War in the Womb. And it's all stemming from our identity, right? We talked about Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5 a couple days ago. And it says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you and approved of you as my chosen instrument. And before you were born, I consecrated you to myself as my own. I have appointed you as a prophet to the nation. And so Jeremiah 1:5 is talking about Jeremiah's identity that was prophesied to him even before he was formed in his mother's womb. The Lord has already spoken, like, I already approved of you, I already had chose you, I had already consecrated you to myself, I had already appointed you. And he's giving him this identity as a prophet to the nations, right? And so chapter one is all about our identity, but how there's also a war. You know what I'm saying? And so when you get into the first paragraph, I'm going to read it to you. And it says, I won't lie to you. Getting his way was something he knew all too well. As hard as it is to admit, I allow him to take advantage of me over and over again. Or should I say, they were accustomed to getting their way. I had permitted them to use my temple as they pleased for reasons I didn't quite understand at the time. It officially started in high school, but I would have to say that someone planted the seed much sooner than that. Okay, so that's the first paragraph. That's like that introduction of this whole book, okay? And so we're talking about silent shame. We're talking about the master's keys to overcoming condemnation. We're talking about healing and experiencing freedom and restoration. All of the things in Abortion Recovery Awareness Month. I talk about all of these things in Silent Shame, the book. And so, quick story time, okay? So, that was an introduction. That was the beginning of the book. And so in my younger days, right, I found myself striving for perfection. And maybe you can relate. I guess you could say that I was a people pleaser. And I'm going to say that because I don't believe I was a people pleaser, but I believe when society is telling you, like, do this, do this, do this, do this, you want to obey the rules, right? I don't know about y'all, but I grew up in a household where, you obeyed your elders, you followed the rules, you did what you were supposed to do, right? You were taught to go to school, you were taught to get good grades, because if you do this, then X, Y, and Z will happen. Okay. And so for me, from a very early age, I found myself striving for perfection. I wanted to make everyone proud. I was that girl who, like, you wasn't seeing no BCD or F on my report card. You wasn't seeing no N's and U's on my report card. I was straight A student for a very long time. I think I made my first C, D, and F when I got to high school. And the F, I probably made that one time, and it probably was an AP class. And that's advanced placement for y'all who don't know about AP classes. And so I found myself striving to make everyone proud in the areas of, academics and all of these things from an early age. And in my teen years, I struggled to understand my identity because I thought my identity was made up in, being perfect, making sure I got all the good grades, making sure I did everything I needed to do. I joined all the programs, I joined all of the societies, I was active in X, Y, and Z. I was doing all of these things, right? Because I wanted to make sure people were proud of me. I wanted to make sure I didn't disappoint people. Okay. And so I didn't know much about my purpose. I knew what I was taught and what was instilled in me. And the thing that was drilled in me, like most people, was to do good in school, to go to college and be successful, whatever that means, right? And it was to attain this sense of perfection. So once you go to college, you get a good job, you get married, you have kids, you have a family, and you just live this successful white picket fence life. This is what we were taught. We were taught this in school. We were trained up in this at home. Our teachers and our school counselors, they all push this same philosophy. Okay. And so, me, because this is what I was being taught at an early age, I was striving to attain this purpose. You know what I'm saying? That was told to me. More so, I felt like if I didn't, then I wouldn't be, I wouldn't receive the reward. I wouldn't be successful. I wouldn't be a successful person later on down the line if I didn't get to this point or start these steps early on. Okay. And so you could say that from an early onset stage of life, I was searching for my purpose, but I was looking for definition in the wrong things and the wrong people. Because when we start getting to Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development, you'll begin to see that during these years, like later on in middle school, all of high school, you are literally being developed. Your identity is being established. Now, I just told y'all in Jeremiah 1:5, it was already established in the womb. But if you haven't been taught that, you don't know that. Okay. And so if you haven't been taught foundational scriptures like Jeremiah 1:5, that God already has a plan for you, God has already appointed you as X, Y, and Z, that God has already consecrated you and set you apart. If you haven't been taught that, if that's not the identity that's being instilled in you from early on, then you will see what Erikson is talking about, how true it is. I used to be a middle school teacher, okay, for 5 years. And I could literally see how my middle schoolers and even the high schoolers that I came in contact with, how that stage of their life, it was a lot of like identity confusion. It was a lot of trying to figure out who they were. And we're going to get into more of that later, but I'm telling y'all my story, right? And so back then, I believed that my purpose was to go to school, excel in academics, join groups and organizations that highlighted my success. I thought my purpose was to excel academically. And I thought that being a part of all those things would eventually lead me to going to college and being this perfect, successful person who would be prosperous and later have this great family and life. So maybe you all can relate. Maybe you grew up being told what to do, how to do it by a parent, by a school counselor, by a teacher, by a mentor, by whatever, right? And so this is what society drills into you as at an early age. And if you didn't make an A, sometimes even a B, for me myself, I would feel like a major disappointment, like I said. And if I hadn't run for like offices and the honor societies and the school councils and all of those things, I would feel like disappointment. So I wasn't the athletic type, though I did condition for track in high school and in college, and I actually ran with the track team in college. I mostly did cheerleading, y'all. That was my athletic piece, okay? But I ended up deciding in high school to get a job instead of doing track for real, for real. And so I believe that academics was all I had going for me. Now, keep in mind that all those things are a part of my makeup and were very significant parts of my life and my journey that developed me into who I am today. But those were only fragments of my identity, right? And so that's our quick story time. Let's get into what we came here for. Okay, so as you have heard me talk about, society drilled a certain journey in me. And most of the, like where I grew up, that's what society drilled into y'all. Excuse my kids in the background, because we finna push through this, okay? So this is what society drilled into me. Now, on Saturdays, we go to Jericho Hour for prayer at the church that I attend, and our pastor elect, he was talking about um, deceit, right? Deception. And I thought it was so powerful because a lot of the stuff that I talk about in Silent Shame is about deception. We talk about, the story of Adam and Eve in the book. We talk about how when you believe a lie because you don't know the truth, it leads to a very bad place. Okay. And so he touched on the verse in Colossians chapter 2, verse 8. And it talks about how we must beware of philosophy and empty deceit based on human tradition and basic principles of the world. And so when I tell y'all in my earlier ages, I was striving for perfection, it was because I had been drilled by society of a false philosophy or empty deceit based on human tradition, based on the basic principles of the world. I had been taught to, do this, do this, do this. Now you can't tell me to encourage people to go to college, right? Based on what I know now, based on what I've experienced myself, based on what I've seen a lot of people experience who I knew, who I grew up with, I wouldn't encourage you to go to college. Now, for some people, if God told you to go to college, do what you got to do, right? But I think a lot of the people in my generation, we went to college because that's what we were told to do. That was like a key to success for us, or so we were told. And so I began to see how this philosophy and empty deceit based on human tradition and basic principles of the world caused me to strive for perfection, caused me to, put my identity in certain things that wasn't truly a part of my identity, right? And I think it's important to note that just because someone is telling you these things, it doesn't automatically make them a bad person. So if you think about, like, if your parents are telling you you're going to go to school, and then when you graduate from high school, you got to go to college, you got to get up out of my house, right? That's not because they're a bad, wicked person. It's not because they carry demons, right? You have to understand that these are cycles of tradition. These are cycles of things that have been taught and passed down from generation to generation to generation. And so even our parents, they were also told these same things for a lot of us. So your parents were told, hey, in order to be successful, you need a high school degree, you need to go to college, or you need to join the military, and then you need to do this, you need to get married, have a family, woo-doo-woo-doo-woo. Okay. And so they were taught this, so they taught it to us, and we, not me, but people are also still teaching that to their children. Like people are still developing 529 savings plans for their children to go to college. Meanwhile, I'm like, baby, I'm not encouraging it unless I know that the Lord has spoken. You know what I'm saying? Like, unless you are going for a law degree, a doctor degree, something like that, like, baby, I am not encouraging it. And so that's neither here nor there. So I want y'all to be mindful of this scripture and go back and reflect on, like, hey, where have I been believing this empty deceit or this philosophy that has been based on human tradition and basic principles of this world, but they're not based in God's plan for my life. It's not based in what God has spoken over my life from my mother's womb. Okay. And so let's get into Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. And so this was one of his main contributions to the field of psychology and sociology. And I don't want y'all to skip this part because it all comes together as we continue throughout this month of April. And I want to specifically focus on one of the stages. And this stage is the concept that explains identity versus role confusion. And it usually happens during the ages of 13 to 21. Now, others propose that it start as early as 12, but right around that 5th grade, 6th grade age range, this is where this stage takes place. Now, I'm going to caveat this again to tell you that in Jeremiah 1:5, the Bible tells us our identity has already been spoken in our mother's womb. Before we were even formed in our mother's womb, it's already been spoken, right? But because we're not taught those foundations, we see this identity versus role confusion really heavily played out during our teen years, even when we get into our college age years and things of that nature. And so this stage of our life, during these ages, this phase is very critical to the development of our self-confidence as well. It's critical to how we see ourselves, how we see others, how we see the world around us. So our identity is being shaped at this time. And maybe you have been instilled with, the prophetic word over your life. Maybe you have been taught kingdom principles. But during this stage, if you're not grounded in that thing, if you're not rooted in that thing, if you're not unmovable in that, this is the age where you begin to confuse it, because you begin to see other people who are walking in something totally different. You begin to see other people seemingly enjoying doing the other thing, right? And so that's where you get into that role confusion. So maybe you were taught the right identity, but now you are being confused because of what other people are doing, right? And so during this stage, we're often trying to figure out who we are. We're asking ourselves, who am I? During this stage, you also have people, everybody and their mama saying, what do you want to be when you grow up? What are you going to do after high school? What are you going to major in college? It's all about that identity piece, right? And so we're trying to decide what and who we like during this time. We're trying to understand our feelings. We're trying to understand our emotions. We are becoming more aware of ourselves. We're forming our moral values during this time, or we're reshaping them because maybe they were instilled in us at home, but based on what our peers are doing, what people are saying, what we're seeing on TV, what we're listening to in the music, all of these things are now reshaping or shaping our moral values. And so we find ourselves, because there's so many things at play, there's so many factors influencing us, we find ourselves confused, ashamed, and sometimes we find ourselves doubtful. During this time, we struggle with accepting our physical characteristics. We often compare ourselves to others during this time. It's identity versus role confusion. We're trying to figure out what groups we need to belong to or should join. We're trying to conform to the values of these social relationships and groups, even if we don't 100% agree with them, or every value they uphold. We're still trying to join them. We're still trying to be a part of something bigger than ourselves, right? And one of the main desires that we have during this period is to belong and to be accepted, right? So at the ages of 13 to 21, our relationships are a very essential part of our identity and what we decide to believe in. They can also contribute to our feelings of insecurity about ourselves and how we fit into larger groups and communities. On one hand, if you fail, now if you go and study this concept or these stages of psychosocial development, in the identity versus role confusion, if you don't get it right, they say that you failed at this stage, right? And so if you fail at this stage, you could lack self-confidence as you get older, right? You also may doubt your future or your actual giftings. And it says that you may feel defeated or have feelings of inferiority, right? So now you're walking around, you're intimidated by the success of others. You were already comparing yourselves, trying to figure out who you should be like, why you don't look like this person, all of the things. And so not only are you sensing some inferiority, you're intimidated by people who are walking in their boldness, who are very self-confident. You're intimidated by people who seemingly are successful and happy and have a lot of friends and are popular. But on the other hand, an individual who, quote unquote, successfully maneuvers this stage, it talks about how they develop a sense or a strong sense of self, and they can make decisions based on their values and not easily conform to the others' ideas, right? So I'm going to say that again. So they say during this stage, if you are unsuccessful, right, at figuring out this whole thing, it says that you are more likely to lack self-confidence. You are more likely to doubt your future. You are more likely to doubt your giftings. You're more likely to feel defeated or have feelings of inferiority. But for those who successfully maneuver this stage, they develop a strong sense of self, and they are able to make decisions based on their values and not easily conform to others' ideas. And so when you think about people who have been taught kingdom principles, who have been taught, their identity from an early age, and have been taught the scriptures and to stand on solid foundation, the solid rock, these people are going to be more likely to have a strong sense of self. Like, you're going to walk around with your head up like, oh, I know who I am. I know what God called me to do. I know who God called me to be. And you're going to be able to make decisions based on your values. And it's not going to be as, challenging to say no. You won't have to struggle with conforming to other people's ideas, because that's what everybody else is doing. That's what everybody else is saying. This is what everybody else is listening to. This is what everyone else is dressing like. And so I told y'all, in this season, one of the primary questions we're asking ourselves is, who am I? Or maybe you've heard it stated like this. I already said this before, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so we have our parents asking us, our family members asking us, everyone's asking us, what college are you going to go to after high school? What are you going to major in? Our teachers, our guidance counselors, they're asking us, what are you going to do post high school? As a special educator, when we were in middle school, so I taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And in 8th grade, we have to create transition plans for our babies who are going from 8th grade to high school. And in this transition plan, we're asking them, okay, they're in 8th grade, y'all, and listen to some of the things we're asking them. We're asking them, okay, what are your plans post high school? They ain't even got to high school yet. But we're asking them, okay, where do you see yourself? What type of living situation do you want? Do you want to stay with your parents? Do you want to live on campus? Do you want to have your apartment off campus? We're asking, like, what type of job do you want to work? You know what I'm saying? And because their identity hasn't been shaped correctly, I would have students in 8th grade tell me, like, oh, I want to stay with my parents. I want to work at McDonald's. And it was so disheartening to hear some of the plans that they had for themselves. But we're already asking them this, in middle school. We're asking them, like, what is your plans for life? Someone who is at a stage where they don't even know who they are. They don't even know whose they are. And we're telling them to plan their life post college, really. And so it was just very interesting. This not even on my notes. But we have people asking us, like, what are your post high school plans? They're telling us we have to take these specific skill assessments, career assessments to help guide us or determine how good we are in specific areas. They're training us on how to do job interviews. They're asking us what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, in an attempt to determine our worth by a proposed hourly rate. You know what I'm saying? And so we experiment with these different roles and we join various groups. We take all of these assessments and we're trying to figure out, like, who are we? What skills do I excel in? What route should I take career wise? What route should I take? Should I go to college? Should I go to the military? We're trying to figure out all this stuff out as early as middle school, sometimes elementary school, depending on what kind of school you went to for elementary. And because it's so much coming at us, we begin to do things on impulse, and we find ourselves repeating bad cycles. Right? Also, during this time, it talks about how we become more independent. And so this is the stage of life where individuals should be, uplifted and encouraged, especially by the older generations as well as their peers. But, the older generation, they have more influence than they know. And so this is the stage where it's imperative to empower others so they can identify and understand what they're called to do and establish ways to walk into their purpose. Now, this is why I got out the classroom, because I found myself trying to teach in special education classrooms, math and science, when I just wanted to teach these babies, like, baby, you was called for more. I had never experienced LGBTQ like I did when I was a middle school teacher. I talked to so many girls. I experienced, like, teaching so many girls who were confused. They were just out here. I've heard so many stories from young girls about, oh, this is why I'm gay, this is why I'm bisexual, this is why I'm this is why I'm that. And it's mind-blowing, the stories you hear, because they tell the teachers more than they telling their parents at home. Trust me, okay? And I found myself feeling like this teaching thing ain't it. Like, yes, you get to be with them, but you can't teach these, you can't teach them, and this is what they're going through. I had girls in middle school pregnant with a second and third child. And you want me to teach them math and science? Somebody got to teach them some identity. So I'm up here trying to figure out how to teach my students the curriculum and academics while also managing their behaviors, because I'm a special education teacher. So also managing behaviors, but also I'm telling them about Jesus. I'm also trying to figure out how to empower and encourage them and all of the things at the same time. And it's just not working. You know what I'm saying? And, during this time, it says, you have to empower them so they can identify and understand what they're called to do so that they can establish ways to walk into their true identity and purpose. And so, I still have my babies from when I first started teaching. They still call me to this day. Like, they know that they can come to me for prayer. I used to take my babies to church on Sundays. Like, I'm coming to pick you up, even though you don't stay nowhere near my church or me. I'm coming to pick you up. I'm taking you to church. We're gonna go eat after church, and I'm taking you back home. They knew it. I brought my Bible to my classroom, and it was on my desk. And you would think that, oh, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do that, everybody else is doing everything else. And so you would be amazed at how many conversations just me having my Bible on my desk sparked for my students. My students still call me to this day, Miss James, can you pray for me? Miss Worlds, because some of them knew me as Miss Worlds. Miss Worlds, can you pray for me? Like, Miss, I'm struggling with this, like, I don't know what to do. Like, can you tell me? Like, this is, and now they're grown. But in middle school and in high school, these are the times that we can truly like help them identify the truth, because there's so many lies and voices of deception that's being thrown at them. So we have this opportunity to really speak the truth into them, because they're becoming more and more independent. They're already determining what their values are going to be based on what they've seen, based on what their peers are doing, based on what they're hearing. Right. And if you're growing up and you're hearing a lie, you're going to grow up and continue to believe a lie. And it's going to be more and more difficult as you get older to break and destroy those lies. But it's possible. Okay. It is possible. And so, though it is important that we form our own identity, or really just allow what God has spoken over us to be our identity, I think it's equally important to understand, our identity in Christ, and for others to positively shape or influence our identity so that these children aren't experiencing the unintended role of this stage, like that role confusion, identity confusion. But I would say, going back to my story, this wasn't the case necessarily for me. Did I have older adults and peers, groups, and, mentor programs and things of that nature that was, encouraging me to do certain things and preparing me for society's idea of success? Of course I did. Did they have pure intentions? Sure. Like I said, they were teaching me the same things that they were taught, and everybody was thinking like, this is the way to success. You want to be successful, go this route. So that's what they were teaching me. This is what they were encouraging me to do. They were teaching me how to write resumes, how to write cover letters. They were teaching me how to interview for a job. They were teaching me how to get jobs. They were helping me to get jobs. All of these things. So sure, I had excellent role models. However, there was a lack of focus on my true purpose. And so while I was encouraged to focus on particular skills and excel in them, not many acknowledge my unique skills and abilities in Christ. And I also don't recall being taught as much about my identity in Christ. We would go to Sunday school and Bible studies and things of that nature, but outside of that, because a lot of children these days aren't going to those places. And so outside of that, you don't really get a lot of that. And so the hope and the expectation is that foundation is being laid at home. And so I was busy beating myself up in the areas I didn't like about myself. And so in a critical time where God's truth over who I am innately should have informed my identity, I found myself, allowing other people's opinions, their perceptions to be my foundation, if that makes sense. And so when our identity is left to be shaped by our peers, we become confused. We become misled because we don't know who we truly are or what we are put on earth to do. And so I saw that so much as a teacher. I experienced that for myself because, we're hanging out with certain people. We're always around and we're talking to them more than we're talking to, our family members, our parents, more than we're talking to, people in our church. At least that's how I grew up. And so the things that they're believing, the things that they're listening to, the things that they're saying, the things that they're watching, you're watching it too. You're listening to it too. And so you begin to see how certain things begin to shape your identity. And so we can easily be influenced to behave in ways that are not conducive to us walking into our purpose. We are able to then, now that we've been influenced by our peers and all of these things, now we're making decisions based on being accepted, right, by those who we like or who we look up to, or those who make us feel accepted and loved, whether what they're telling us to do or what they're modeling to us is good or not. And so that was my story. I knew a few things I could make a handful of things that I was good at. I knew what organizations I wanted to join to keep up, a specific image. I also knew what I had to offer, or maybe I thought I knew. Okay. But my decisions were all based on what I knew, what I was being influenced by, and a desire finalized them. Well, Ebony, what do you mean by that? What does this have to do with abortion recovery? And so the decisions that we make is tethered to a deep desire of being accepted and longing to bond. Because these desires, you want to satisfy them, right? And so sometimes you begin to look to satisfy your desires in wrong places, in wrong people, in wrong things, because this need to fulfill a desire to be accepted, it causes you to form soul ties, right? With people, even before you knew what a soul tie was. So I'm going back to this Abortion Recovery Awareness Month. A lot of the times people are getting abortions not because, oh, I can't afford this baby. A lot of times people get abortions because of who they had the baby with. You know what I'm saying? Some people, it was a one night stand, and you embarrassed even just by that. Like, I don't even know this dude. Some people, you don't even remember his name. And so now here you are pregnant, and what you gonna tell people? So you like, okay, let me get an abortion. So then this is like it's never happened. Okay. Meanwhile, you still have formed this soul tie with this person, and you haven't even broke the soul tie, and you think that by aborting this child, by murdering this baby, that everything is going to be gravy now. Okay. And so, and abortion does not address the root of the issue. So if you find yourself constantly pregnant, right, and thinking that the solution is abortion, you haven't addressed the root issue. You haven't addressed the lust issue. You haven't addressed the issue of why do you keep having premarital sex. You haven't addressed the root issue of why do you keep having premarital sex. And not only is it premarital sex, but it's also sex without protection, right? And I know people want to argue, you can still get pregnant with protection. Okay, but most of y'all going raw. Let's be honest. Like, can we not debate about stuff that don't even apply to you? Okay. Like, can we address, like, why do you not have confidence in yourself to be able to tell a man no when he wants to take advantage of you? Can we talk? Listen, I'm just telling y'all what I know, what I've experienced. I'm not telling, this is, if it's not condemning, I'm telling you my life right now. Okay. Because we develop these unhealthy and these unfruitful relationships, and then when we begin to see the fruit of these unhealthy and these unfruitful relationships, now we are walking around pregnant, and we're like, now we're trying to get rid of the baby to try to make everything go back to normal, make everything seemingly be better, when really you need to figure out why you're on such a path to self-destruction, to continue to allow a man to have his way with you, to allow a man to defile you. Why you keep going back? Why you keep making these decisions? Like, you got to make a choice. And a lot of times we want to argue, oh, well, what about the cases of rape? But you weren't raped, okay? We can keep arguing the cases that don't apply to us, but baby, you wasn't raped. And even if you were, God still has a plan for you and that child. But 9 times out of 10, the ones getting abortion aren't being raped. So we can stop using it as an excuse to why we keep getting abortions and we weren't raped. No, you willingly laid on your back. You willingly hopped on that man, right? Whether you did it out of insecurity, whether you felt peer pressure, you never said no. You went to his house. You already knew what was going down when you pulled up. That was a desire you wanted to satisfy in that moment. Now, you may not have planned to get pregnant, but consequences, okay? And so we are on this path of self-destruction. And, most of the time we don't even realize it at the time. And so even me myself, I had allowed myself to be pulled in so many different directions that all I knew was the feelings of inadequacy. I can relate to that. I I knew deficiency. I could relate to that. I knew lack. You know what I'm saying? Like, man, I feel unfulfilled. I I can relate to that. A lot of us can relate to these things. Maybe even you felt unworthy. Maybe you felt like, oh, nobody's gonna love me if I don't lay on my back. Maybe that's the only way you feel accepted by a man. Or maybe you didn't have a father figure in your life and you felt like, oh, if I let this man do whatever he wanted with me, then he would love me, then he would accept me. Maybe you had daddy issues and that's the root that you need to get to go and deal with. You know what I'm saying? And so these are the things that we have to look at and deal with. And so when we talk about these stages of development, when we talk about identity versus role confusion, when we're talking about, the things that shape the decisions that we make, this is how this relates to Abortion Recovery Awareness Month. Because yesterday we talked about getting back to the root. And when we get back to the root, we began to realize, like, yeah, I actually did experience some of these things. I did feel unworthy. I did feel unloved. I did feel like I needed to be accepted. I did go and talk to this dude and, have sex with this guy because I wanted to be accepted by him. You know what I'm saying? Like, when you really start to think, like, if you honest with yourself, because I know some of y'all like to be dishonest and y'all like to, play the victim and all these things. But if we for real honest with ourselves, we start going back and be like, man, I was really out here acting dumb. Okay? We're going to call it what it is. We were really out here being dumb because we lack knowledge, because we didn't know. And even though it's not an excuse, because the Bible tells us people perish for lack of knowledge. It doesn't say that, oh, people who are ages 25 and up perish. It says people perish. We make decisions in middle school and high school that could change the trajectory of our life. And so, also, how does this play into the Abortion Recovery Awareness Month that we're talking about? According to the CDC, I'll give y'all some quick stats. According to the CDC, abortion usually occurs in women aged 15 to 44. And if you realize, that's the beginning of Erikson's identity versus role confusion stage. And so during this time when girls are trying to figure out their identity, when guys are trying to figure out who they are, we got everybody out here just confused. Everybody trying to figure it out. Everybody trying to be accepted. Everybody trying to belong somewhere. And this is the time where girls are having sex. Like I said, as a middle school teacher, I used to walk the hallways and see middle school girls in 7th and 8th grade pregnant on a second and third child. This stuff is real. And so imagine middle schoolers are pregnant and their parents are trying to cover up because they don't want. And guess what? Most of the time, these dudes are high schoolers. It's not a rape situation, but you have now their parents are like, okay, get an abortion, get an abortion, get an abortion. And so according to the CDC, abortion usually occurs in women ages 15 to 44. And if we want to break it down, this is in 2021, this is one of the reports from the CDC. And so 8% of abortions were teens aged 13 to 19. And you may be like, oh, that's just 8% of the 100%. And then when you start thinking about it, it's like, it's still 8% of teenagers aged 13 through 19. That's right during this identity versus role confusion stage. That's 8% of girls who, if we had taught them better, who could have had an opportunity to choose the other way, right? They could have even avoided the situation altogether if someone was there encouraging them, if someone was telling them, baby, listen, this is what God says about you. You are his beloved. You are this, you are this, you are ahead and you are above and not beneath. You are his royal priesthood, his chosen generation. You are the apple of his eye. You are this, you are that. If you're telling this girl that a dude could never be like, oh, you so fine. Oh, you so thick. Oh, you so this and that, and cause her to, buckle at the knees, because she already know who she is. So any dude trying to come and convince her of something else is not going to, tickle her ears or make her be quick to open her legs. Okay. And so 8% is big enough for us to, do what we need to do. And so then you get into when you get in your 20s. Now, remember, in the Erikson stages of development, when you're 20, 21, you're in college. So now you got this freedom. Okay. You turn up, you busting it wide open. Listen, I'm telling y'all stuff I've seen, I know, I've experienced. Okay. So it says 57% of women who had abortions were in their 20s. They were in their 20s. 31% were in their 30s, and 4% were 40 to 44. And if you keep on looking at these statistics, you're going to see that the majority, I think it's like over 80%, are also unmarried. So we can't be like, well, it's women who are married and getting them. Yeah, but it's more who are unmarried. And so these are the statistics. And what's the point? And so the point is our choices and the influence others have on us during our teen years, during our college years, they literally shape our decisions, y'all. Listen, it shaped my decision to get an abortion. And not only to get an abortion, but to remain secretive about it for years. Listen, when I was in high school, even though like I've never heard people really, really talk about abortions, but in high school, I knew that there were so many girls getting abortions. So I didn't think like, oh, nothing's wrong with abortions. You know what I'm saying? Because you don't hear a lot of people talking about like abortion is bad. You didn't hear none, like when I was growing up in high school and stuff, I never heard nothing about no pro-life movement. I never heard these things. But I knew about Planned Parenthood. Why? Because half of the girls in my high school were on birth control. These things begin to shape and influence your decision. And so if like, oh, everybody having abortions, your friends having abortions, your classmates having abortions. And so when you randomly find out that you're pregnant and you like, oh, snap. The first thing you think of is not, oh, let's have a baby. The first thing you think about is abortion for most of us, not all of us. And so also going back to like what I was taught, like, oh, in order to be successful, you need to go to school, graduate with your high school diploma, go to college, get a good job, get married. And so when you get an abortion and you already know what your plan and your journey is mapped out to be, and you just get pregnant and you like, hold up, this wasn't the journey. And so immediately, because of what you've been taught, because of the philosophy and empty deceit based on the traditions of man and the principles of the world, you immediately began to think like, oh no, this wasn't the plan. This isn't my journey to success. And so now you immediately begin to think, even if you weren't taught this, based on what you were taught, you will begin to believe that, man, if I have this child, I'm not going to be able to be successful. If I have this child, I'm not going to be able to be in my career. If I have this child, I'm doing it out of the wrong ways. I'm supposed to get married, then have children. This is what society drilled into you. And so now you're thinking like, oh, this pregnancy, something ain't right. Something got to change. And so all of these things begin to shape the decision you make. It didn't take me long to decide to have an abortion. As soon as I found out, I said, oh, Google abortion clinics near me. Okay. And so I say all this to say, this is why we must guard our hearts. This is why we must guard our minds. This is why we must teach our babies, teach our daughters, teach our children to guard their eye gates and their ear gates, because the things that influence them at an early age, and you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised. As a teacher, I have insight to know that at home, these parents think their children are one way, and at school, they're a totally different way for most of them. And if you don't teach these babies from an early age, if you don't instill in them a strong foundation from an early age, the world will teach your child. And they will come. I remember it was one girl, I didn't teach her, but I did one of her co-talk classes. And she would come to school dressed one way. Soon as she gets to school, she'll eat her breakfast, she'll go to the bathroom during the transition time, and she'll come out with a whole nother outfit on. And I remember one time her parent came up to do like a teacher parent conference or whatever. And I think one of the teachers were telling her about like the way her child was dressing and how she was behaving. And the parent was like, surely you ain't talking about my child. And lo and behold, they were like, we'll just pop up on her one day. And one day she popped up on her and she was like surprised, okay? Because she was like, I don't buy clothes like this. So where you get this from? Where are you getting these short skirts from? Where are you getting these tops from? You know what I'm saying? You'll be surprised. Come pop up on them. Come pop up on them. Just stand outside the classroom door and listen to the kind of words they saying. Just come, okay? And so, but this is why we have to teach even our children to guard their hearts, guard their minds, be very protective about what they're listening to, what they're seeing. Y'all, it's songs that I hear today, and I don't listen to secular music no more. But let's say it's playing in the gym, it's playing at the beauty shop or something like that, or it's on somebody's reel or something. That's why most of the time I don't even listen to Instagram with my volume on. My husband tell you, I'll send him a video. He'd be like, "Did you listen to this?" And you know what they say? I'm like, "Nope. I just looked at the captions, or I just watched the video of what they were doing. I didn't listen to it." You have to even when you know this stuff, you got to guard your eyes, you got to guard your ears, you got to guard what you come out your mouth, you got to guard your heart, your mind, all of these things, because things can shape what you think about yourself, others, in the world, what you believe in, how you should look, how you should dress. It's this recurring cycle. So now you in your 20s and your 30s and you're still struggling with your identity and you're still confused about who you are. And you're still trying to find your purpose in your 40. It's because we didn't guard our gates. And so, like I said, teach your daughters and your sons to be rooted and built up in the word of God from an early age, or else we will allow them to be deceived by the world, by their peers, by false teachers, and by demonic philosophy. And so that's it for today, y'all. I'm gonna post this one, and then I guess I gotta catch up. So I'm like a day behind. So either I'll come back to y'all tonight with the next one, or we'll do 2 tomorrow. Anyway, I hope this blesses you. Be sure to leave a comment, to share it on your stories, or share it to somebody you know who needed to hear this. Send me a DM if you have questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, y'all. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Listen, if you disagree, say you disagree. I mean, I don't really care, if I'm honest. But tell me, or maybe you got some scriptures and be like, well, actually, that's not scriptural, or that's not accurate based on the word of God. Like, go ahead, run it up, send it to me. Okay. I'm not a prideful person. So you can disagree with me. You can tell me like, well, here's what the scriptures say. I'm going to be open, but I'm still going to have my heart guarded, my mind guarded, because I'm going to beware of the false teachers and the people who twist scripture too. Okay. And so, anywho, that's my encouragement to y'all. I pray it blesses y'all. Have a great day. We're about to start preparing for church. Happy Sunday.